Hello and welcome to my first Magic Deck Tech. Today I'm going to be going over my Sydri Galvanic Genius deck, and it is aimed at about 80 to 90%, power level. That's what people like to call it. Um, Esper colors and her abilities read target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost until end of turn. And you pay a blue for that, and then you pay black-white for target artifact gains death touch and lifelink until end of turn. So the idea with this deck, my fun and initial inspiration for the win con is going to be Aetherflux Reservoir, which is whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell cast this turn already. And then you can pay 50 life to deal 50 damage. So the cool interaction between her is you can animate Aetherflux Reservoir with the first ability, and so it becomes a creature, and then you use your second ability to target Aetherflux, give it lifelink and death touch, and then when you pay 50 life, you deal 50 damage with the creature, gain 50 life back, and you can you can defeat all your opponents in hopefully 1 turn, unless they have Teferi's Protection, something that can save them like that. So that's kind of cool. My alternate win cons are Death the Deathless and Exsanguinate. So we got 2 sorceries, and they basically work the same. You want to create a bunch of mana and put it into the X spell and drain everyone out at the same time. So each opponent loses X life, you gain life equal to the life lost that way, and each opponent loses 2 times X life, you gain life equal to life lost that way. So really similar cards. They're both pretty color intensive since this is an artifact eggs deck. Sometimes the colors can be difficult to achieve, but that's why they're alternate win cons and not the main one. Not the main one. So let me show you what the eggs look like so we can get an idea of what we do with those. So I'm going to start with Lotus Petal, Terrarion, Conjurer's Bauble, Chromatic Star, Chromatic Sphere, Sky Cloud Egg, and Dark Water Egg. So these are pretty old, so I'm going to read them. You pay 2, tap, sack Dark Water Egg or Sky Cloud Egg, and you add blue-black or for Sky Cloud white-blue to your mana pool, and you draw a card. So it's essentially a cantrip that filters your mana for you. Since we will be making a lot of colorless mana, these can be helpful, whether you draw them early game or late game. Early you want to sack them for a card, potentially if you're searching for some action. And late game, it gives you the colors you need to cast your combo pieces. Origin Spellbomb, not usually considered one of the best ones, but I do have Salvaging Station in here, and the creature token that you put into play can untap Salvaging Station, which is pretty cool. Necrogen Spellbomb, I never use the first ability. It's always just sack, draw a card. This one, I usually, you have to use it to draw the card. So this one I sometimes can use defensively, but more often than not, I'm sacking it to Quark Clan Ironworks or to itself to draw. So the spell bombs all allow you to have one effect, and their other effect is, at least for these two, is you can sack them to draw a card, like you just sack them to draw a card for 1 mana, and these are you tap, and then you pay an additional colored mana, and then you draw a card. So you get the effect first, and then you draw a card. That's useful since we're going to be having some recursion in this deck. These are all filtering. This is all color filtering, so it's similar to these here. And they all let you draw. So this comes into play. Tap 2, add 2 color of any mana to your mana pool and sack it. But this one you can sack to Quark Clan and draw a card anyways. Like, it doesn't have to die from its own effect. Same with this Chromatic Star here. You can just sack it and draw a card with Quark Clan Ironworks. And then here is Chromatic Sphere. You have to, this is just like the eggs, but it provides 1 mana, and it costs only 1 mana versus 2. This is another egg. It allows you to potentially put a combo piece that is milled, or you've discarded, or you've used and you want to reuse and tutor for. Conjurer's Bauble, tap, sack Conjurer's Bauble. Put 1 target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library and draw a card. So it's a cantrip. Lotus Petal, sack it, add 1 color, cost 0. That's the big deal. So you can sack it, get a colored mana, bring it back, sack it. That happens quite often. So the interaction I have with those eggs is going to be Court Clan Ironworks, Clock of Omens, and then which reads, Clock of Omens reads, tapped 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So this allows you to use your eggs if they don't have tap abilities preemptively before sacking them to Court Clan Ironworks, which is sack an artifact, add 2 colorless to your mana pool, both 4 cost. So, you know, they just have a lot of synergy. So after you tap all your artifacts, maybe you have Court Clan Ironworks out, and then you basically get 3 mana from each artifact, but it's like 1.5 because you need to tap 2. And you can tap these 2 for themselves, and then sack them both. Then I have cost reduction. I have Helm of Awakening, which is all spells. This is artifacts, and this is artifacts, and they're both artifacts themselves, so I can really tutor for them. This is Ethereum Sculptor and Foundry Inspector. And this allows your eggs, which are mostly all 1 mana, to be free. So if you draw a bunch of eggs, have a cost reduction, you can play a bunch of them with Aether Flux Reservoir up and get a nice high storm count. Voltaic Key is just a general utility artifact. I have Basalt Monolith and Mana Vault in here. So this can untap those for free, and it can untap maybe a salvaging station or something else you need. It's a high utility, and it works well with, if you don't have Clock of Omens, a little cheaper. It gives you double use on colored mana rocks. Speaking of mana rocks, let me show you what I have as far as that goes. I've got Mana Vault and Soul Ring as my 1-drop. So this is add 2 colorless. This is add 3 colorless with some downsides. I got Mind Stone, Basalt Monolith, Grand Dynamo. So these all add colorless. And then Mind Stone can work as an egg because you can tap it and pay 1 to draw a card, but you don't get the color filtering. So it is -1 mana, but if you need to search like for answers, like for something, just because you need card draw, that works. Then we have some just colored rocks. We've got Commander Sphere, which is great. You can sack and draw a card. It's just another egg, almost, and it filters your mana when you need it. We've got Talisman of Dominance, adds black or blue for a life. Orzhov Signet, Dimir Signet, and Azorius Signet. All the signets in my colors. And then Lotus Bloom. Lotus Bloom is pretty good because it is suspend 0, but it's 3 colored mana, any color, any 1 color. So you can add 3 black, 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 3 white, white, white. And then hopefully we're going to get it back, right? So once we just get it back from the graveyard, there's no suspend, and we can reactivate it, which is awesome. So Recursion, we've got Codex Shredder. Codex Shredder, I don't really ever use the first ability. The 5 sack Codex Shredder, return a card from your graveyard to your hand, is the second ability. And it's pretty useful. The other cards that this deck runs that aren't artifacts that it wants to recur are Faith's Reward, Roar of Reclamation, Second Sunrise, and Open the Vaults. They all have really similar effects. Second Sunrise is the cheapest, cost-wise, it only costing 1 and 2 white. Each player returns all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards that were put into the his or her graveyard from play this turn. So it's an instant, it works only for this turn, but hopefully you're sacking all of your artifacts and potentially some of your artifact lands. And creatures, if you have creature artifacts, that's great too. It is symmetrical, so you have to be careful if you destroyed any of your opponent's things or if they're sacrificing permanents. This one is also symmetrical, Open the Vaults, but it is a sorcery and it's only artifact and enchantments. So that limits what your opponent would potentially get back, and it's good for you. It's a little more expensive, but that's okay. When we're comboing off, the hardest part potentially is getting white, but by the time you're playing this, you should have white with all of the filtering and everything. Similarly, we have Roar of Reclamation, right? It's 7 mana, but it's only artifacts, and it is all players. And then Faith Reward is actually the closest to Second Sunrise. All permanent cards in my graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So that's 4 mana instant, and that's pretty great. Some more recursion that I have is Scrap Trawler, Mirror Retriever, and Salvaging Station. Salvaging Station is it's a little less combo oriented because of its high mana cost, but it can be very useful. And if I have reduction artifact creatures on the board, I can sack them, potentially getting, it to untap again, especially if I'm killing opponent's creatures with something, like maybe I use Damnation or a board clear of some sort, or someone else is killing something, right? It gives me, it's kind of like an untap effect, almost like Unwinding Clock or something. It allows you to untap, but instead it's recursion. So it's kind of high utility, and it gets all my eggs back, so it's kind of a draw engine. These two here, Scrap Trawler and Mirror Retriever, this is when it goes to the grave, return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand, and this is when Scrap Trawler or another artifact I control goes into the graveyard from the battlefield. I can choose another artifact in the graveyard with lower mana cost and return it to my hand. So they work in tandem together quite a bit. So if you have a 0-cost artifact and a sacrifice outlet, you can, I believe you can infinitely loop these by like using Quark-Clan Ironworks. I believe that's the KCI combo. The Quark-Clan Ironworks combo is these two. Usually it's Mox Opal and KCI. But the idea is you stack the triggers so you get all of them back and you net 1 mana. And it goes infinite, but this deck isn't necessarily looking to go infinite. It can, but that's not the goal. It's not super casual, but it's fairly controlled. Card draw. We've got Riddlesmith and its older brother. We've got Vidalcan Archmage. So they both say, whenever you play an artifact spell, but Riddlesmith is you loot, so you draw and discard, and Archmage is you just draw a card. Obviously, it's reflected in its mana cost, but they're fairly useful. You're going to be playing a lot of cheap eggs, and if you need to dig for your win con, like you haven't found a tutor, or you're digging for a tutor, pretty useful. Brainstorm, draw 3, take 2, put them back. Preordain, scry 2, draw a card. 1 mana cantrips are pretty nice. We've got Windfall, because I don't really mind having certain things in my graveyard, and this deck can kind of be explosive. And if it runs out of gas, this is a nice way to refuel if you have someone with a large hand on the other side of the table. Thirst for Knowledge just has really good synergy. Frantic Search is nice. You draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. So you just basically get free draw and card filtering. so it increases card quality a lot. Here we have Paradoxical Outcome. So Paradoxical Outcome is super useful if you have a lot of eggs on the board or just artifacts and a few cost reducers. It can, if you have Aetherflux up, it allows you to storm off really easy. So you draw 10, 15 cards, depending on the board state, and then you also return them to your hand. So that's, 20 spells that you will potentially be casting. But obviously you're going to hit some lands, so it's probably going to be more like, 12 to 15 spells. And that's enough usually to storm off with Aetherflux. Which is pretty nice. So it's kind of a 1-2 card combo with this. And if you don't have Aetherflux out, this can just power you through to things that can help you find it until you do. And then you can tutor, play the rest, So then I have some tutors. Tutoring can reduce fun, I guess, but it also, increases consistency. So if your deck is looking to win on a turn, turn 4, right, and it wants to go for its combo, that's great. You can use a lot of tutors. I have some tutors that aren't so great, some restricted, they have restrictions, but I have fairly powerful artifact tutors. So I've got, Trinket Mage gets 1 or less artifact, mana ramp, or for an egg, or soul ring, or mana vault, anything like that. Reshape, as a cost, sack an artifact, and then you pay X. Search your library for an artifact with converted mana cost X. So it's just a tutor comes right to the battlefield, and that's pretty strong, especially since we don't really mind our artifacts going to the graveyard. In fact, a lot of the times we want that to happen. Whir of Invention is 1 more blue than Reshape down below, but it has Improvise, so you can kind of convoke with your artifacts to search for an artifact and put it right on the battlefield. It's pretty nice when you can tutor Lotus Bloom or Lotus Petal with it, because Lotus Bloom comes right onto the field. It's a 0 cost, so you pay 3 for 3, and if you have a mass recursion in hand, then you break even on mana, and then when you recur, you'll be up 3 more. So that's very useful. Fabricate searches for an artifact, super good tutor. Merchant Scroll searches for an instant, so Face Reward and Second Sunrise are both instants. And then I can also search out some removal spells if I need to save myself. Mystical Tutor searches, again, to the top of your library, and it's an instant 1 mana, really strong card. Limdul's Vault is an interesting card. It allows you to reorder your library, the 5 cards at a time for every time you pay 1 life. So it's kind of a tutor, it's kind of a card draw, but you don't actually draw cards. So if you're looking for something specific, you want to set up the next few turns, you can use Limdul's Vault until you hit something that either protects you, finds a couple combo pieces or a tutor and some card draw. So maybe you need a land. It's only 2 mana, so it can be very diverse for you depending on your life total. And hopefully we'll have a lot of life because of Sydri, potentially, but mostly from Aetherflux. If we find this in the middle of the Aetherflux combo, then we can stack our whole deck, and that's pretty nice. Muddle the Mixture is a counter and a tutor, so it has Transmute for a 2-color cost. That finds a handful of eggs, and it finds a lot of our other tutors, like this is 2 mana, Reshape is 2 mana, Merchant Scroll is 2 mana, Limdul's Vault is 2 mana. Our Artifact Reduction is 2 mana. We've got Mirror Retriever at 2 mana. A lot of eggs, a handful of eggs at 2 mana. I believe that would be... No, I think they are all 1. All of the eggs are 1, but the rocks, a lot of them are 2. Azoria Signet, all the Signets, Talisman, Mind Stone. But it's mostly in there for flexibility. So Demir House Guard gets Faith's Reward, and Aetherflux, which are two key components. Diabolic Tutor, nice 4-mana tutor with 2 black, searches for any card, and then long-term plans puts any card third from the top of your library. So if you're drawing cards, this is an instant, and you'll be 1 or 2 cards away if you use it at the end of in an end step somewhere. So since I'm not all out super speedy fast combo, although it is fairly quick, we've got some removal. Got Swords to Plowshares, exiles a creature, just like Path to Exile, exiles a creature, both 1 mana, really strong. My second counterspell, just covers all my bases. I think I would almost rather have Pact, because the only time I really want to counter something is when it makes a huge impact on what I'm going to do during my turn. Hardly ever do I counter something unless it's going to exile all my artifacts or something like that. Something I would counter would be Stony Silence, because it shuts off my whole deck. Another way to deal with Stony Silence is Mortify. Destroys a creature or an enchantment. So Blind Obedience, which makes them come in tapped, that kind of thing, can really slow me down. This destroys an enchantment or a creature, so I like the flexibility, and I can tutor with it with Mystic Tutor. Here's a board wipe, Evacuation. If I have a few artifact creatures out, this is pretty strong, because if I have Aetherflux or something, it also serves a dual purpose besides being a defensive spell. Sometimes things are indestructible, or they can't be targeted. You don't have to use it on your turn, so your opponent can play out their turns. You basically time walk your opponents, depending on who attacks you or whatever. Unlike with Damnation, great board clear, right? But you have to use your whole turn for it, as opposed to letting your opponent establish themselves and then they're tapped out after they attack you, or something like that, right? So depends on how things are ordered. It can be more useful. Merciless Eviction is just another way to deal with enchantments, planeswalkers, creatures. I usually don't exile artifacts because most of my deck is artifacts. Caltrops is a card that deals 1 damage to each creature when it attacks. So again, this is another target you can animate with Sydri. Target non-creature artifact becomes a creature artifact, and then enchant target artifact creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink. So if a bunch of creatures are attacking, and this deals 1 damage to them as a creature, they all die without indestructible because it has Death Touch, and I gain a bit of life, like 5 or 6. It depends. So this is a defensive card. It fills the same slot as kind of like Ghostly Prison. It's more of a deterrent, and most people are going to destroy it before they attack you, right? Or remove Sydri, something like that. Hopefully, you have ways to deal with that, or it's late enough that you can combo. Then I have Blind Obedience, which gives me another way to gain life and kind of drain my opponent before, maybe help me out with Exsanguinate or Debt to the Deathless. And then it slows my creatures down, opponent's creatures down. They come into play tapped, they're artifacts, so they ramp slower and they attack slower. So if they are an aggro deck, it's definitely going to hurt them. Anyways, that's been the deck. I hope you enjoy, and it kind of told you a little bit about what Eggs does, and you found some cool interaction with Sydri, and I just wanted to share with you guys and kind of have a little personal archive. So, have a good day, guys.